Being a fan-owned club has been a source of pride for Newport County, owned by the Supporters Trust, but it's come with certain challenges in the Football League because financially they've been found short, structurally possibly as well, and I think the takeover of Huw Jenkins gives the club a little bit of positivity for how they can move forward with a vision and with some investment. But there's some compatibility question marks about Newport County, specifically with the squad and with manager Graham Coughlan, that we'll be discussing on this podcast, whether the takeover is the right thing for the club fundamentally and how they can move forward. That's what we're going to be discussing with the 1912 Exiles podcast on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 we're recording between mid-June and mid-July across the EFL. Already a few uploaded for League Two onto YouTube and Spotify, so go and check those out and subscribe. Maybe even drop us a rating if you fancy. Once you're done with this one, for now, delighted to be joined by Dr. Ed Bridges from the 1912 Exiles podcast. Ed, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. Just talk to me about how you're feeling about a summer of change at Newport County.
Oh, there's a question. I think we're still waiting is the main feeling. Because, I know like not everyone has signed oodles of players, but we've not signed anyone yet. We've had lots of people go out the door. We've had a couple of really good statements from the new chairman about what he's hoping to do. There was some stuff about bringing through younger players and, different attitude towards who we sign. But until actually we see some names coming in, there's just a little bit of trepidation about, well, we understand the theory, but what does that look like in practice? I think the mood is different from this time last summer when there was kind of chaos off the pitch. There were financial problems, and we knew that the takeover was likely. Now I think there's a sense that, right, the ship is steady, but until we start to see who's on that ship, we're not sure what course we're going to chart.
Ed, you've been quite an ardent campaigner for Newport County to be a fan-owned club, and I really do sort of share your feeling on that feeling of we own our football club. It's something that very few fan bases in professional football can say in the current climate, and I do really see the romance and the attraction of that. At the same time, do you almost feel like it's got to a point where you've kind of needed somebody to come in and just inject a bit of capital and a bit of, I guess, higher level nous?
Yeah, and I mean, that's not just my view. That's the view of the auditors of the annual accounts. It got to the stage where, with the best will in the world, 2,000 trust members paying in, 5-10 quid a month was not sustaining the club. In the years when things were going well, when we were getting to playoff finals and having cup runs every year, you could make a go of it. After a few slightly leaner years on the pitch, COVID as well didn't help. It had stopped being sustainable. And yeah, like you say, I would prefer for fans to own Newport County. I'd prefer for all clubs to be owned and run by their fans. I think football would be in a better place if it was. But I think you've got to be hard-headed about this and say there was a big financial black hole. Us as fans were not going to be able to fill that, certainly not in the short term. And what we've come up with is quite a good compromise, I think, where, Huw Jenkins, the former Swansea owner, is the majority owner of the club. The Supporters Trust retains a significant minority stake. It will have seats on the board. We're doing trust elections in the next few weeks to, sort of decide what that new trust board will look like. And that's still a hell of a lot better than a lot of clubs manage. So it's not ideal, but the fans retain an interest. And if we can regenerate the trust and have a healthy and vibrant trust in the years ahead, then who knows, down the line, there may be opportunity for the fans to get more involved again. But at the moment, I think just the economics of running a fourth division club, particularly in the last few years, have meant that, Newport were not in as strong a position as, say, Exeter or Wimbledon to have kept it afloat. So this was inevitable, and it's been done in the right way. And I think you saw that when fans voted on whether they were happy with Huw Jenkins coming in and taking that majority stake, the vote, it was like, Putin levels of support for it. I think, it was like 97% or something voted in favour, because we felt this was the right person at the right time with the right arrangement.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, Ed, because I'm a believer that with any one-off instance, you've kind of got to give people the benefit of the doubt. Otherwise, you become a bit too sort of cynical, I suppose. But I'm slightly curious that when Huw Jenkins released his statement on the 10th of June, he said that the reason that no signings had been made yet was because they had some under wrapped that they couldn't announce until the official opening of the transfer window on the 14th of June. We're now on the 18th of June, and there still haven't been any signings allowed. Is there a kind of curiosity, I guess, from the fan base as to why that hasn't sort of transpired?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much taking the view that we trust in the system, and it will probably come good. But it's hard to not look at that statement and go, well, at the moment, as it stands, I think we've got 14 players under contract. We've got if they've not yet been tied down, that sort of suggests that they're at least thinking about a move elsewhere. And yeah, we need to do a bit of a rebuild. That's pretty clear. So I think we'd like to see, we're not expecting to sign 10 players in the next week, but one or two marquee signings that give a sense of, right, what is the shape of this squad? What's the plan? What's the strategy? What are we going to build around? Because even the players we've got under contract, players like Will Evans and Shane McLaughlin, who pulled up trees last year and did really well, I'm not yet convinced they're definitely still going to be here when we play the first game on the 10th of August. I think they may yet be tempted elsewhere. So who are we basing this squad around? What's the plan? I think it would be good to see some answers to that. And until we see signings being announced, we can't know that. So although I'm not getting too down about it, because we've still got weeks and weeks to go. I think an indication of the direction of travel would be good.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a feeling for a lot of fans. I've had a look at the squad in terms of big picture, and I've calculated. I don't know if this matches up with your estimations, Ed, that you're going to need a minimum of 10 players coming in, and possibly up to about 13.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, 10 is my kind of base level of what I think we're going to need. Some of those are clearly going to be backups. Nick Townsend is going to be number one choice in goals. So, you're looking for someone to be a number two to him. And there's a few other examples of that. But equally, some of the players who are under contract are themselves young players who are going to be backups. The likes of the young lad Seabury at centre back, Nelson Sanka. We've got two very promising young centre backs, but you don't want them to be playing 40 games a season. If they come in and they play 10, 12 games a season, then great. So there's some real change that's going to happen. I think we've lost some big players already. Scott Bennett has gone to Cheltenham. That's a big, he'd been here for like 10 years and was a big leader in the dressing room. All right, age perhaps is catching up with him, but he's still the sort of player who will play 45 games a season and constantly be a 7 out of 10. So replacing someone like that is not straightforward. Ryan Delaney, we're yet to hear back from in terms of his contract offer. He was captain last year and a real kind of rock for us at centre half. So, there are potentially some really big boots that are going to need to be filled.
I want to ask you about the recruitment policy, Ed, because Huw Jenkins's statement was very much along the lines of we want to go down, we want to reduce the average age, and I think it hinted a little bit at possibly a more progressive style of play, and certainly Huw Jenkins's background would suggest as much. And yet, if I sort of visualise the best Newport County sides over the last 12 years, I think of demanding managers. I think of really strong characters that kind of, there's a sort of a kind of a healthy friction between the managers and the really core of leaders, if you like, and players that kind of feed off the adrenaline of the atmosphere that Rodney Parade can create, which is, by the way, for me, a very special place in British football because of the atmosphere and the electricity of it as well. So I'm just wondering, how do you balance this sort of desire to go in a different direction to become more sustainable with actually keeping the core essence of Newport County.
Yeah, it's a puzzler, isn't it? And I think that's really what I'm driving at when I'm saying, we want to get a sense of the direction of travel, because I think there is going to be a departure from the approach we've taken over the last, since we've been back in the league. We're not going to suddenly start splashing the cash, doing a Wrexham, as I believe it's known. We're not in a position where we can just go out and buy who we want. But what is different is I don't think we're going to have to sell for whatever offer comes in. I think we're seeing that we want to try and bring through young players and keep them here, and then sell them at the right time and for an appropriate amount. And that is, like you say, a departure from the approach of the last few years of signing experienced pros who've got a lot of character but maybe have issues with injury, for example. That was a big problem for us last season. And yeah, we as fans, I think, will need to be patient, because there will inevitably be some youngsters who don't make the grade. And we also are going to need a coaching setup that helps them develop better than has been the case in recent years. So there's a whole load of challenges there. There's challenges for the manager and his coaching staff around changing it so we are more about developing younger players. There's a challenge for the players themselves about perhaps not having as many leaders in the dressing room as they have done. And then there's a challenge for us as fans to be more patient with younger players, and patient as this kind of new system beds in. So it is a bit of a transition summer, I think, in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, I'm a big admirer of the job that Graham Coughlan has done, stabilising things in his first season, and keeping you up comfortably in his second, despite maybe a disappointing finish, sort of mid-table form for probably 2/3 of that campaign as well, on one of the lowest budgets. And he certainly delivered results, and he certainly, I think, ingratiated himself with the Amber Army. At the same time, I have a few compatibility concerns with Graham Coughlan and the long-term vision that Huw Jenkins has.
Yeah, I think that's all entirely fair. And I think he's been given the benefit of the doubt because of what he has delivered in that difficult season, with all the stuff going on off the pitch and the takeover and everything. There was a sense of, we don't want to make any changes to the managerial side of things. Let's just let him carry on with delivering what he's doing. I think in the long term, there probably is a question about whether he is the person to deliver on this. But again, I think he sort of has earned the chance. Listen, I think if you ask most fans, they will be positive about Coughlan. He's kind of weaved straw into gold for much of the last season. Despite that mammoth injury crisis, he kept us well away from danger. He got us that cup run, which created that special night against Man United. We beat the likes of Stockport and Wrexham, had some great results, and outperformed expectation last year. But there was that 8-game losing run at the end of the season, and that's still very raw, I think, for fans, and no doubt for him as well. And we've got to put it right quickly. I think if there's any sense of hangover as we go into the new season, then the knives will probably be out. He built up a lot of goodwill last season with the fans, with the owner, but I think a lot of that goodwill did get used up. I don't think there's many managers who could go 8 games losing every single one of them and still be in a job. Coughlan is still in a job because he built up that goodwill, but I think it's almost like, right, starting the new season with a clean slate, he will know what he's got to go and deliver. And I think if we do get off to a poor start, then he may find that he does come under pressure.
Yeah, I think that does make sense, and that's probably part of the concerns that I have about Newport County, because of if there is a change in season, it's going to be harder to implement what you want to do than it would be with a long run up into the campaign. So, but I also go back to what I said earlier. He has done a fantastic job, and if we're looking at this from a fairness point of view, he definitely deserves to start next season as manager. So let's start with the goalkeeping position then, Ed, because you've got Nick Townsend, who started all 43 of the 46 league games last season, and presumably from what you've said, you feel very happy with the performance levels he's produced.
Yeah, listen, all players in the 4th division are capable of making the odd mistake, otherwise they wouldn't be at this level. And Townsend will have probably 2 games a season where he throws a couple into his own net and looks completely at sea. But in all the other games, he will pull off some fantastic saves. I think, and you have to net it out over the course of a season. I think Nick Townsend was probably worth an extra 10 points for us last year with some of the saves that he made in critical games. But yeah, there were a couple of games, I think around Christmas time, where he struggled and had some poor matches. And that will be the same again this season. But I think most fans have got enough faith in Nick Townsend that he's worth persisting with, and he is one who is a good character around the place, and so I would expect him to start most, if not all, league games, and so it's just a question of finding a good number 2 to sit behind him.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to recruit for second choice goalkeepers. Sometimes they've either got to be very young goalkeepers who aren't desperate to start regularly straight away, or sometimes they can be veteran goalkeepers who are sort of in their mid to late 30s who are happy to be a bit of a mentor and be a safe pair of hands where required. So yeah, hopefully you can make the right addition. And then centre half, because I'm curious, you mentioned Sanka and Josh Sebery as well. Do you think they've got a real chance of if it starts pre-season where you've not got so many centre halves on the books and the fact that you play a back 3 as well? Do you think that could really give them an opportunity to prove themselves?
Yeah, I think both of them are really good prospects, and I think most county fans would want to see them tied down to a decent length contract. Josh Seabury came in, and we were really scraping the barrel at that point. We could, if I turned up with a shirt on, I probably would have got a game at centre half. We were really struggling, and he got thrown in at the deep end and did incredibly well. He'll make mistakes, but his instincts were good, his positioning was good, and then he broke his leg, I think it was at Notts County, and missed the rest of the season just when he was really starting to get into the groove. But there was a player there, definitely. And then the young lad Nelson Sanka, who's come through the youth ranks, again played a few games towards the end of the season when we were in that awful losing spell, really difficult time to come in.
Sure.
But there were a couple of games where I saw him and he looked like the best centre half out of the 3, despite playing with much more experienced players. So again, there will be hurdles along the way for both of them, but I think they will both find a place in the squad, and I'd expect both of them to play a decent number of games next season as backup.
Yeah, and you're expecting to recruit for a back 3, do you think, Ed?
I would expect so, yeah. I would be very surprised if we didn't stick with the kind of three centre halves and then 2 wing backs. The bigger problem, which we'll probably come to, is creativity in the central midfield. But most of the creative outlet last year was in wing backs, and we're not going to play wing backs without 3 centre halves. So at the moment, the only experienced centre half who we've definitely got is James Clark, who is great. He's no spring chicken, but he's very good at this level. I would love for us to have Ryan Delaney, but I think the rumour mill suggests he's off to possibly Swindon. Tranmere were mentioned as well. I don't think he's going to be here next year.
Yeah, absolutely. That would make a lot of sense for him to get a move like that. What did you think of Carl Jameson in his first season, Ed?
Sorry, Jameson, you're quite right. Yeah, I completely forgot about Jameson. He was one. He missed a lot of football. He was another one who had a long layoff. Started the season, looked good, had a really long layoff, and then came back in the spring and looked very, very accomplished. Left-sided centre back, scored a good goal for us at Wimbledon, I seem to recall. And he will definitely be one who will start. So you've got him and Clark, but I think you need at least one more. In order to give us a full complement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, Jameson can stay fit next season as well, because that's always tough when you have an injury crisis at the back. And then I wanted to come to you on Shane McLaughlin, because at the moment he's the only right wing back option that you've got under contract, but he's also somebody who could potentially fill in at left wing back or in midfield as well. Do you see him continuing to deputise in other positions next season, or do you feel like if you can have 2 players for every position, then you'd want Shane McLaughlin to be your right wing back?
One of the defining features of Graham Coughlan's transfer policy is he likes players who can cover multiple positions because we've got this small squad. He needs to have that versatility. So, McLaughlin is a perfect player for him. Will Evans as well. Players who can cover multiple positions. Like you say, McLaughlin played most of his games at right wing back, but he could fill in on the left. He did fill in a few games in centre mid as well. But if he's still here next season, I would expect him to be our first choice right wing back, and for that to be his preferred position. I think there are a few of us who think there's a good chance we might bring Adam Lewis back in at left wing back. We had him on loan, obviously from Liverpool last season, and again, he's one who he's not without weaknesses in his game, but he was solid enough. Coughlan and him seem to have a good understanding. He's been released by Liverpool, and I think he may well be one who decides he'd rather come here and get regular football than chance his arm higher up the leagues and be third choice left back somewhere. So I suspect he may be one who's in the conversation. But yeah, beyond that, we've only got the only one who's actually under contract is McLaughlin, and even he might get poached.
Well, that timing could work out quite nicely with Adam Lewis getting released, because makes him available, and yeah, he might want to take that option of getting first team football. And again, if he does well with that, then he's another one who could become a bit of an asset, which it seems to be part of the model. So I want to ask you. You mentioned that central creativity in central midfield earlier, and I suppose if I look at the options on paper, we don't know if Harry Charsley is going to stay, but he's very much a bit of an athlete rather than a technician. Aaron Wildig, again, we don't know if he's going to stay, but he's a bit more of a leader, a bit more of a deeper player. He's tidy but not super creative. And then Bryn Morris, who again I'd have associated being a solid midfield player. You've only really got Nathan Wood as someone who I think was at Pony Bent. A couple of have I got that name right?
Penibont, but that's good solid effort. So yeah, actually he was one who came in last summer as a fairly raw youngster. He'd actually been in Counties Academy and ended up at Penibont in the Cymru leagues, and had done really well. He scored a fantastic goal actually for them on live telly. But he found his chances a bit limited. He's quite slight, so I think there's a sense he needs to have beefed up a little bit. He went and had a loan spell at Cork City actually over the summer. He's come back from that now, and I think that has helped his development a bit. But listen, he's one who might come good, but yeah, I don't think we could rely on him. So we don't have any creative midfielders on our books. Wildig may or may not sign a new contract, but I think arguably we probably need an upgrade from him. We've got plenty of hardworking ball-winning players, the likes of Bryn Morris, who I've got a lot of time for. I hope we'll keep Harry Charsley, because he's a real mountain goat.
I've always liked Harry Charsley, and I think Coughlan has as well, because he had
he is very much a Coughlan player. And with Bennett going, Scott Bennett off to Cheltenham, I think Harry Charsley becomes even more important for us. Okay. But the thing we need is that creative spark in central midfield. We relied, I think, too heavily on our wing backs to create stuff last year. And when teams stopped us from doing that, we struggled. So I think, although we need to strengthen in every position, a more versatile midfield with some creativity that can generate chances for the front men when the wing backs are struggling, I think is top of my list. So it really is the top priority. Nathan Wood, I think, is an option. We've got a young lad, Jack Norris, who made a few appearances, but I wouldn't want us to be relying on either of those.
Of course, yeah. No, that does make a lot of sense. I think with the midfield three, what you're always looking for is the right balance or blend of quality. So I'm thinking if you've got Bryn Morris sort of as your solid midfielder at the base, and then you've got Harry Charsley given a bit of license to go and press and use his athleticism, but then you want that other midfielder that can really open things up and possibly travel with the ball and try and create and just bring that bit of flair. Then I think if you put those three together, you might have a decent decent combination.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can find the right additions. Obviously, it sort of goes without saying, really, that you need a couple of left wing backs and ideally players that are going to be quite attacking as well. Because as a left wing back, you're going to need players to be willing to push forward, especially given how much you relied on them last season.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, Adam Lewis did well there. He didn't have a flawless season by any means, but on a good day, he was a great option. Shane McLaughlin, when he filled in that position, did well. Towards the end of the season, when we were really struggling, Will Evans played in that position. But obviously, if you play Will Evans at left wing back, then you don't have Will Evans up front. If only we could clone him, we'd be in a much better position. So yeah, I mean, the wing backs I keep coming back to it. It's so important because so much of our attacking play relies on having capable players who can go forward and generate chances, but also get back and defend. And yeah, we are at bare bones at the moment, to put it mildly.
That makes sense. So up top then, do you know, I was really surprised to see Luke Jeffcott featured 16 times last season for you after signing in January and didn't score once. And I just wonder, Ed, is there, when he scored a lot of goals at Plymouth Argyle, it was in a completely different system and it was all geared towards creating chances for him. Do you think that there's a stylistic issue with Luke Jeffcott where you're not necessarily creating for him in the right way, or do you feel like he himself just didn't do enough for you?
Listen, I had always said right from when we signed him, he's one for this coming season. My sense with Luke Jeffcott, and this may well turn out to be wrong, is that we were getting offers for Will Evans in January, and we said, right, we're going to hold on to Evans for the rest of the season because we need to make sure we steer clear from trouble. But Evans will probably go in the summer, and we need to sign an Evans-style replacement who can be ready for the start of the new season. And I think Jeffcott was that player.
Okay.
Jeffcott had been at St Johnstone, I think, and had barely played any football all season. He turned up, he looked a little bit chunky, carrying a bit of extra timber. He clearly hadn't played much football. I suspect, that hadn't done wonders for his mental health either, kind of being, left out of the side and struggling. So I think he was a project. And I didn't expect him to play a great deal or score a great deal in the second half of the season. So it didn't surprise me that he didn't get any goals. By the end of the season, he was looking leaner. He was looking sharper. He had a goal chalked off in one of the games. I can't remember which one it was now that really should have been given. And I think once he gets one, he'll get two. And once he gets two, he'll get three. It's going to be one of those. I think he will come good. And I'm kind of staking my reputation on the line with that. But I think if you look at what he's done at Swindon, what he's done at Plymouth, the reviews we had, he's a good player. He just needs a bit of love, needs a bit of needs to find some consistency and some form, and needs the service. But I think once we get all of those things right, and particularly if he has a good pre-season as well, I think he will come good. I really do. And so I'm just like I said, the slate has been wiped clean with Graham Coughlan from all the good stuff that happened, and the bad stuff. It's now right. You'll be judged on what happens this season. Same for me with Luke Jeffcott. He didn't have a great first 6 months here, but that's in the past now, and we see what happens from August.
Do you think it would benefit him almost if you cashed in on Will Evans then, because he'd become the main man?
No, because I don't see any upside from letting our top scorer go. But I think we're in a different place now. Omar Bogle has gone. Afranti Zanzala has gone. We at the moment, if we had to play a game tomorrow, it would be Evans and Jeffcott up top starting. So Jeffcott is going to start getting some football, and he'll be in the mix. So I think it's fine. He will get to play some football one way or another. Like I say, I think he needs a good pre-season, but once he starts getting some goals and I think as well, just that sense of this now being his time and his chance, I hope that he'll start feeling a bit more positive, and we'll see that shown on the pitch.
Let's hope that's the case. I have to hand it to you, Ed, because I was actually a little bit doubtful as to whether Will Evans was going to be up to League Two level this time last year, but you were very much of the view that he was, making a decent contribution the year before, and he would really catch fire, and that's certainly how it's transpired. Just talk us through the 23-24 season that Will Evans has had.
Yeah, well, I think cycle back to the season that he'd had before, where he played a lot of games at left wing back. Like I say, he was another versatile one. He played some games in centre mid. He played some up front, but without scoring. A little bit like Luke Jeffcoat, he was getting pelters for playing up front and not scoring many goals. But he came in his first season in full-time professional football, and he played over 40 games. It might even be more than that, and was just a really willing runner, did what he was told, went where he was told, worked really hard, didn't always come off, but he was a Coughlan player. He was a workhorse. And then the season just gone, he was a perfect example. He started off playing some games up front, which is his preferred position, got a few goals, the confidence started flowing. A lot of it, I think, last season as well was about partnerships, and whichever combination of strikers we ended up with, he tended to be in the ones that were more successful. Him and Bogle, and in particular him and Seb Palmer-Holden, who I suspect will go on to do much better things this year. Will Evans, just flourished in those different partnerships. And so, it surprised me just how many goals he scored, but I definitely felt that he was one whose time had come. And, physically, he was bigger and stronger and tougher than some of the players who've come in from the Welsh League, people like James Waite and so on. I'm really pleased for the season he's had. He's a wonderful fella. He has you could see him growing in stature. He believed the season just gone. He wasn't a kid there, a raw talent. He was there as a senior pro, and you could see that just in the way he was around the pitch, laughing and joking and kind of being that talisman. He loved it. And when there was all the Man United game press attention, he played up to all the stuff of, yes, he was a dairy farmer and now he's scoring goals for 4th Division Newport County. So he loves all of that. And it's just wonderful to see. And I suspect he may move on to better things, but I've really enjoyed the couple of years of Will Evans that we've had. If we can get another 6 months or 12 months out of him, so much the better.
Yeah, hopefully you can do that, or at least you get a very competitive fee that helps you with this rebuild that we've spoken about. Because it may be that the trajectory that Will Evans is on and the trajectory that Newport County are on might look a little bit different. So we'll have to wait and see. But talking of strikers, I'm a big fan of the talents of Kibben Rai, the Tibetan talent.
Nepalese.
Oh, sorry?
Nepalese.
Oh, Nepalese, sorry. So that's he's a really exciting prospect, isn't he?
Yeah, he kind of drifted out of contention a little bit towards the end of last season. But yeah, I think I'm right in saying, I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, son of a Gurkha, grew up in Brecon. There aren't many half Welsh, half Nepalese footballers in the league. I think he's the only one, and seems like a lovely kid. Scored a great goal against Brentford in the League Cup, and was on the fringes, then kind of drifted out a little bit. I think possibly he might have benefited from getting a bit of loan football in the second half of the season. He's still one who, it could go one of two ways. But again, if he can beef himself up a little bit physically, then who knows? He's got the raw talent, certainly, and it seems to have a great attitude as well.
Yeah, well, that's definitely what you want. So hopefully he can have a big season. So just to condense with everything we've talked about on this podcast, then, Ed, what are the expectations for Newport County for next season?
I mean, so much of it is about context, isn't it? Last year we outperformed expectations. Granted, we only finished 18th, but until the end of March, I think we were in the playoff conversation until that 8-game losing streak set in. But we were never in any real danger of the drop zone all season.
Mm.
And like I say, we managed to beat a few of the big boys and have a little cup run and a little adventure.
And Wrexham.
Yeah, exactly. And we did all of that against a very difficult backdrop with financial problems and change of ownership. And also, and I do think this is worth stressing, it was a really strong league last season. We've lost some of the really exceptional teams like Stockport, Mansfield, and much as it pains me to say it, Wrexham as well. Last year, even a side like Notts County, who battered us twice, didn't make the playoffs, which shows just how good some of those top sides were. And even at the other end, all right, Forest Green were a bit of a mess, but they had very deep pockets. So this season, it isn't as rich a league, and I don't think it's as strong a league either. The replacing those 6 that we've lost are some solid teams, and there's some who are going to be top half. I think Chesterfield and Cheltenham perhaps. But there are some who I think Newport would realistically expect to be better than, Bromley, for example.
Sure.
And I think there's a few potential basket cases in there, like Fleetwood and Morecambe, and there weren't many basket case clubs last season. So, I think this coming season, we're in a stronger place off the pitch. We've got more financial stability. Yes, we've lost a lot of experienced players, but as long as we can, have a reasonable transfer window, and we can start the season well, then there's no reason why we can't aim for another kind of mid-table finish. And I think, so that's kind of where I'm at. But until we sign players, it's really hard to make any firm predictions. So it'll be a mugs game to guess how many they do. But as a podcast, we do love a mug. So I'm going to stick my neck out and say we're going to improve by 1 place and finish 17th next season.
Okay, yeah. So if we say, in terms of the targets, let's say consolidation is the target, whilst what Huw Jenkins has said, which is lowering the average age and making some developmental progress along with that. So let's say those things are the target. What are the reasons, based on everything we've talked about, what are the key reasons for you, Ed, to believe that Newport County can meet their ambitions this season?
Well, I work on the basis that it's not as difficult as last year in terms of the quality and the finances the teams are up against. It's not as difficult as last year in terms of our own position off the pitch. We've got the same manager who managed to battle against all the odds last year to get us to finish in a reasonable position. And we've arguably got a better nucleus of players still under contract this year than was the case 12 months ago. You've got, at least for now, McLaughlin and Evans. You've got the likes of Bryn Morris, who played 50 games last year and did really well. You've got, Townsend, Jameson. So there's enough there to work with. It's never an easy transfer window for Newport County, and there will be some surprises in there, I'm sure. But like I say, everything suggests we're in a slightly better position than we were 12 months ago. Even if we are every day kind of constantly refreshing Twitter and waiting to see some signing news. Yeah,
absolutely. What are your reasons for doubt? The big one for me would be the compatibility issue that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. So if we sign completely kind of young players who fit within that Huw Jenkins vision, and they don't immediately come good, and we have a rubbish start to the season and we lose 3 or 4 games on the bounce, then suddenly there's going to be a lot of pressure on Graham Coughlan because of the poor finish that we had. And then you might see panic stations, change of manager, and then all the cards get thrown up in the air, and you don't necessarily you might change manager and still not have someone who can get the best out of players who, in this case, they wouldn't have even signed.
Or they try and introduce a completely different idea in season, which can sometimes be difficult as well. So
exactly. So I hope it does need to be a transition season. We do need to move towards that Jenkins model, but I hope there's enough common sense that we also allow Coughlan to have 1 or 2 of his style of player there to kind of steady the ship, because you don't want to find yourselves in a situation where a couple of games in, we've got a young, inexperienced squad coming under all sorts of pressure from fans and manager. But again, I think Huw Jenkins is sensible enough, and he's been around football long enough to know that you can't kind of build Rome in a day.
Sorry, I just seem to have lost you there. There we go. I think we're back.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. So you can't build Rome in a day.
No problem at all. I think that there's that. So it's probably possibly a bit of a concern. And then obviously, if you've got to replace the 23 goals of Will Evans, that's going to bring its challenges and some uncertainty over one or two key players as well. And you've got to make sure that you get the right additions. So balancing out those two things, you've actually given me a prediction which I wasn't expecting you to. But I'd like you to give me a number between 1 and 10 as well that denotes your level of optimism for the season ahead. Right now.
God, that's tough. Possibly a 3.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. I think that's the point. Right. I would like to think that we've got enough about us that we'll be kind of a third of the way up the table and out of trouble. But yeah, there's so much that can go wrong. Like you say, if we don't get the goals because we lose Will Evans, if we don't sign good enough quality in terms of creativity in those wing-back roles or central midfield, if the players are too young and we don't have the experienced leaders that we've relied on in the past, all of those are big potential red flags. And like I say, the biggest risk of all is that if we get off to a bad start, Coughlan comes under pressure, things could unravel quite quickly. The converse is true, however, that if we get off to a very, very good start, everyone settles into it, and then I think we can really start to feel a little bit more optimism. But a lot depends on those first half a dozen games, I think.
Yeah, I think your point about giving Coughlan 1 or 2 signings to suit his way of working, I think is going to be really important if this is going to work under him, because what you don't want to do is have so many young players that Coughlan. It's like you need players who can kind of reinforce Coughlan's management style a little bit. Whereas I feel like if it's just young players who aren't used to his management style, then I think that could be really difficult for him to get his ideas across and sort of stamp his mark on players. So that will be my concern. But I can also see the optimism point that you are structurally and financially in a more secure position than you were. Squad wise, it's looking a bit better. So I can see both sides, and that's the fascination of football. So it's been a great discussion, Ed. Thank you so much for your time. Love the 1912 Exiles podcast as well. Keep up the great work with that. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive on Newport County. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll see you again very soon.